Hey gamers and goblins, my name's Cara and welcome to my Homeworld 3 series. This series is sponsored by Gearbox, like I'm being paid to make these videos. Play today! Sounds like one of those War Thunder ads. You can check it out with the link in the description and buy it today on the Steam or Epic Game stores. This is the complete beginner tutorial to Homeworld 3. In the last video in this series, I basically helped us get started and get a feel for the basic controls and a little bit of how to play Homeworld 3 just by going through the tutorials and settings and background. So if any of that interests you more, check out the whole playlist. In this video, we're going to start with the first couple missions in the campaign. The way they're set up is sort of like a tutorial itself. So if you just play through a few missions, it really helps you understand. Just to get started, if you want to, you can skip the cutscenes. For me, it's space. For you, it might be a different button, maybe P or escape or whatever. It depends if you want to get into the story or not. I'll have another video in this playlist if you mostly want to skip the narrative and just jump into the gameplay. The campaign starts by asking you to do some basic commands, like move around and harvest resources, and attack some drones before moving on. The mothership also has guns all over it, so you can kind of reposition the ship to like broadside certain units. Keep that in mind for the campaign later. Resources are a really important part of Homeworld 3 like any strategy game. It gives you all the credits you can use for building and researching. Then you do some light combat by attacking some drones. You test out your fleet a little bit, and then you get into the first real mission after some narrative. The game kind of holds your hand through the first mission too, but it does get a lot more intricate from here on out. Basically, you start by fighting some Callan raiders. So even in the first mission, you gotta make sure that you always have resource collectors doing their thing. I'll normally just bind them to an action group and press H by default to have them harvest the nearest resource they can find. A suggestion I have for this part too is that you might be worried about your mothership taking damage or whatever, but it's actually pretty strong. It has a lot of health points. So you can kind of send it in there along with your units. You don't really need to worry about it as much as I did. I'd also recommend building a bunch more ships just to help you fight all of the waves of raiders that you'll be dealing with for this part. Otherwise, you might get kind of overwhelmed like I did at first. For fast and mobile units, I like the claw formation a lot. It looks cool and it does a pretty good job at concentrating firepower while still being maneuverable. Remember also that you can pause if you need to gather your bearings, or you can even slow down the game speed. It's called a tactical pause. I think that's a pretty funny name. I'm not taking a break, I'm just taking a tactical pause. Make sure to diversify your fleet with a well-rounded fleet roster. You unlock more and more types of ships throughout the game. Just build a handful at least of each one you have access to. And then the second mission ends by you almost defeating the pirate carrier before they just get away. So yeah, after the Callan raiders get away, you're basically all like, no, they got away, we need to chase them. And then they lead you into the most obvious ambush ever. It's kind of a running theme of this campaign that you're constantly being led into ambushes and figuring out how to try to survive. Anyways, the third campaign mission is the first real mission, and it might be a little bit intense, but it's okay, we can do it. This map has a lot of environmental destroyed buildings for you to hide in and around too. So you can use it for fighting the bigger ships that come up later. You can also kind of travel through this undersection, like a tunnel, and sort of sneak up on people. I don't know, it's just sort of fun. As far as fleet composition goes, I would just say make sure that you build a handful of everything that you can. At first, you want to prioritize faster strike forces to deal with the skirmishers that come along. Basically try to harass your resource harvesters. And then you also want to have some bigger ships ready to attack their bigger capital ships. There's a kind of rock, paper, scissors going on in Homeworld 3. Like, you gotta have the right unit types to match their unit types, or just a lot more units to match their unit types. The fighting around here is pretty interesting too. I was still learning the game at this point, so this definitely isn't the best footage. But I like this part where I sort of separate one of the capital ships away from the other capital ships to make it easier to attack them. If you want to have more ships at the ready for if some of your ships get destroyed, you can keep on building past the limit and then just have them queued up for whenever one of your ships gets destroyed. As you can tell, I did that a lot here. Make sure to always try to be aware of your environment too, because you can pretty easily get swarmed. Like, you can ambush them and lead them into traps, but they will try to do the same thing to you. They're not as smart as you are, but if you're not paying attention, they can still get you pretty bad. A few tips if you're struggling with this mission are: 1, to take it slow. Remember that you can use your tactical pauses whenever. Figure out where the enemies are coming from. The dialogue gives you a lot of hints in this mission too. For 2, always make sure that you have enough resources and that you're collecting resources when you can. And don't be too scared to bring in your mothership like I was for the first couple missions in this campaign. For whatever reason, I had the assumption that the mothership would be a lot more prone to damage than it actually ended up being. But it's sort of funny because literally in the next mission, you legit just crash straight through a ship. And I'll have more videos for tips and tricks later in this series, but for now, you can do things like select your damage units and dock them so that they fly into the mothership and get healed up. You can also try attacking from different directions and in different sorts of formations. I think I had units in the claw formation too much. For bigger units, I think the X formation or the circle formation are probably the better ones. And for mixed types, maybe even the delta or the wall or the trail are the better ones. I'm not too sure for mixed unit type compositions. It's probably the circle. And then yeah, once you collect everything that you need to and you destroy the capital ship of the pirate raiders, the Kalan, again, we'll go more into the plot later, but you basically get told that we were running from the anomaly and we kind of got stuck between a rock and a hard place or whatever. Pretty simple, pretty easy to get, even if the nuance of it gets pretty complicated at times. At least for the first few missions, if you build up a lot of units, and even if you just death swarm them, you should be able to win those missions. But if you want to play it more carefully, have separate strike forces and larger ship forces that can do more damage to bigger ships, protect your resource collectors, and don't be afraid to send in your mothership more. Your mothership's actually pretty resilient to a lot of damage, and it's more resilient later on in the campaign when you get ships that can actually heal your mothership, which is a lot of what the next mission in the campaign's about if you want to try playing that one too. I'm not going to cover it too much, but it basically just teaches you how to build up enough ships to heal your mothership, and it also shows you that in places like nebulas where there's not a lot of visibility, it's really important to build some probes and send them out so you at least have some advance warning of when ships are going to attack you or whatever. So yeah, that does it for my beginner's guide to Homeworld 3 using the first few campaign missions. I hope that helps you get a really basic feel for Homeworld 3 without digging into the intricacies too much and getting overwhelmed right from the start. Thank you again to Gearbox for sponsoring this series. Make sure to check out Homeworld 3 using my link in the description below if you want to play it today. And the next video will cover 8 things I wish I knew when I started playing Homeworld 3.